You're listening to Your Rivers Are Wrong, the podcast. My name is Merle. I'm here with my good friend Dante, and we're here to build worlds and tell their stories. So sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Good morning, or evening, or afternoon, whenever you may be. Welcome back to a very spooky episode of Your Rivers Are Wrong. I'm one of your hosts. My name is Dante.
And I'm the other host. My name is Merle.
Ooh.
It already starts.
And we're here as we are every week to talk about the wonderful whimsies of world building, the arts and aesthetics of setting up a setting and telling stories born from it. I'm excited about this episode.
I'm excited about this episode too. It's not very often that the intro is already in theme, I would say. So that's true. That's promising to me.
In fact, I don't think we've ever walked into an episode with a theme before. This might be the first one.
We maybe just never done it before. Maybe that's why.
Might be entirely new.
I mean, no, we're so professional. We're like super conscious about everything we do all the time.
Of course. Yes.
Dante, please elaborate on the theme for this one.
Why is this episode so spooky? Well, let me tell you, if you're one of our very loyal listeners, which is a very small amount of you, but that's okay, you might notice this episode was released on Halloween.
Yeah.
Very, very fun. So we decided to take this opportunity to focus on a little bit of the creeping under the night topics today to celebrate what is a very iconic holiday. Mm-hmm. Now, Merlin, do you do anything special for Halloween on your end of the world?
No, and I wish we would. It really depends on the household or on how many, I guess, big your city is, maybe. I feel like Halloween is a very, very much a thing, came from somewhere else, and now we kind of do it, but not really, kind of only if you're into it, sort of thing.
Got it.
It's very American to us, but still super fun. There's not really an official kind of trick-or-treat thing that everyone does as a child or something.
Yeah, interesting. Because in America, you kind of adapt to Halloween. It doesn't matter what culture you... Like my family, nice. I'm a first-generation American. My family didn't come from the U.S., so when they got here, they learned about Halloween, and they're like, why are these costumed kids...
What is going on?
coming to our door?
It's a very confusing holiday if you'd ever heard about it before, I think.
Yeah. So I didn't grow up with Halloween, like celebrating it or anything like that. My parents were always like, that's a little weird. So you're not going to do that. But enough. When the kids came to our door, we're like, well, we have to be hospitable. So let's get some candy and give it out to them. So we had these big bowls of candy that we could not eat ourselves, that we had to continually hand out. And I'm like, well, what kind of holiday is this?
It's the saddest thing. Aw.
But we got whatever candy was left over at the end. So, kind of paid off sometimes.
I love how that sort of subverts the holiday, but then still you feel like it's a festive thing because you could eat the like leftover ones. And also I really wanted to see the moment, like the first kid that ever like rang your doorbell and then your parents would open and be like, what? You want candy? What? Why? I don't get it.
The experience of a new homeowner is just strangers coming to your door. And
yeah.
What could possibly be the reason? But obviously we've warmed up to it just a little bit. And if you live in America, you know what Halloween is. The holiday comes to you, quite literally. So the neighborhood, no matter where you live, always decorates to the nines and cobwebs and spider hangings and all. And
I feel like you also have like big front gardens with a lot of space to put like giant skeletons and like spooky spider webs in the trees and stuff. That's a thing, right? Like the bigger, the more spookier, the more lights you have, the better.
Yeah. And personally, I think it's a party foul when people skip Halloween and go straight to the turkeys or the snowmen or the Santa Claus. I'm like, it's not even Halloween. There's three major holidays in America.
Okay.
October is for Halloween, November is for Thanksgiving, and December is for Christmas and all the holiday-related things.
Yeah, I never realized that. For us, it's just December full on because we also have Sinterklaas, which is the other sort of holiday that nobody else in the world has, I guess, but us. So yeah, December is like fully packed, and then before is kind of nothing. Except when you're like a Halloween person, I'm very excited about it, and you do it anyway.
Oh, that's true. I guess Thanksgiving isn't universal.
No, that's not a thing.
We probably talked about this a long time ago. But yeah, totally makes sense. So for this very special episode, we'll do what we always do, but with a little twist. Each of us will bring a topic to the transatlantic table, as I'm getting more and more favorable of as we continue to talk about it.
We got to keep it up.
It's very great. I bring a topic, Meredith brings a topic. We don't know what each other's topics are, and that's kind of the fun in it. And then at the end of the episode, we handle a prompt entirely improvised. I think I'm starting this week. Is that correct?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So because this is our first themed episode, there is a higher likelihood than normal that our topics are the same thing. And if they're not, that's good. If they are, then we'll just spend the whole episode talking about them. That's kind of how it goes.
Also wouldn't mind that. Yes.
That's true. So to celebrate our first Halloween on this podcast, I'm going to go with the classic, tried and true topic of vampires.
Ooh.
We're going to talk about vampires just a little
love
bit.
it.
All right.
Let's go.
Is that your topic? I need to know.
No, it's not. So we're good.
We're jumping into it. Because I had a backup topic also, just in case. I was thinking about it.
And it's not necessary.
But I have way more notes about vampires. So we're going to go.
Nice. We did well today already.
That's good. Now, vampires are among the most famous, if not top 3, most famous cryptids in all of folklore. There are so many different through lines attached to this specific monster that a lot of monsters don't get the love of. You know, you can put most monsters on like 3 bullet points, maybe 4, if you really need to. And you're like, that's the monster, right? With vampires, they've got a dozen, and that list is slowly growing. And today I want to tackle why vampires have become so interesting or appealing or have found themselves in the modern media eye. And what does their presence do to shape the story that they're in? So we're going to start with the top. We're going to talk about what is a vampire. For the one of you, maybe 2 of you who don't know what vampires are, we're about to talk about it.
Where have you been? Because they're all around, but yes.
Exactly.
Let's define first. This feels like a good start of any topic that we...
Yeah.
Maybe we should do this more.
So from the top, vampires as a concept or a vampiric creature is not new to folklore. The thing that steal things from innocent people has been around since the dawn of time, mostly demonic origins. And vampires are kind of the crossroads between those demonic storylines and the undead. And where they connect is where you find the vampire. So most of the now traditional vampire lore finds itself from southeastern European folklore. And it has a number of these topics or aesthetics or characteristics that further define it as a vampire. And I'm just going to go down a list of bullet points, which I just found myself adding to slowly but surely. I thought there would be like 3. It's going to be like blood, teeth, night, but there's way more than that. You know?
Okay.
So I'm going to go down what I know. And if I've missed anything, please let me know.
Yes.
First and foremost, vampires drink blood, usually human blood. Sometimes they drink other creatures' blood, but human blood is the prize. It's like the caviar of blood, you know. They are weakened by sunlight. Therefore, they prefer being creatures of the night, hiding themselves in the veil of the darkness, right? They have morphing powers. They can turn into a bat, very traditionally, matching the teeth and blood-sucking nature.
I forgot about that one. Yeah.
And they can also turn into wolves, which are also equally scary at night. Actually, a little bit more scary than bats, but you know, that's a personal thing. They have the weaknesses, and these are very interesting weaknesses. They can't see themselves in a mirror. They cast no shadows. They can't touch running water. They need an invitation to be allowed into a household. And to get rid of a vampire, which the methods of getting rid of a vampire have changed over the years and kind of grown. You can stake them through the heart. You can drown them, you can decapitate them, or just plain incinerate them. There's many methods to kill a vampire because otherwise they're very resilient, they're very strong, they're very durable. They're like a high value garbage bag. It's just impossible to break them, you know?
Wow, that's a specific.
That's a very bad metaphor.
Yes.
All right.
Also, I love how this is sounding like a sort of like survival guide to how to either feed or grow or understand or kill vampires. And I'm pretty much into it. Yes. It's
like the worst gardening book. It's how to grow your vampire.
The worst one. Yeah, for sure.
5 tips on what not to do to your vampire, you know?
Yes. Well, I think this is a very comprehensive list. Also, because I don't know a bunch about vampires. I'm not very well educated on vampires, I think. I know kind of the Twilight version and the very Wikipedia summary of like Dracula and stuff and the sort of more classical ones. And that's kind of it. I'm already learning, even though we have barely scraped it. Like, they can turn into wolves. Like, when did that happen? I don't know anyone who can turn into wolves. Yeah, that's a whole
thing.
I don't know any vampires in general, but, you know, I don't know. Didn't know that vampires could do that. And I guess then there's the one Taika Waititi film, the What We Do in the Shadows mockumentary, that taught me a little bit about vampires, but that's maybe not a very good source in general. So I feel like this is a better start than I could have done anyway. So yeah, sounds good.
Well, what's crazy about that is that even if you haven't consumed any vampire-related media, like most people know the concept of vampires.
Yeah.
Which is kind of unique in terms of like modern day cryptids. Like there are sometimes they're like localized monsters.
You keep saying cryptid, by the way. What's that?
So cryptid is another name for like a monster of legend.
Oh, okay.
Let me see if I can find the official definition. Cryptids are animals that cryptozoologists may cryptozoologists
so
is a
cool.
whole thing.
What the hell?
Believe may exist somewhere in the wild, but are not believed to exist by mainstream science.
Oh, that's cool. I love that someone can like put that on their CV.
Cryptozoologist.
That's so cool. I didn't know you could be that.
It's definitely something that they will ask you about during your interviews.
That's very cool.
It has here right beneath McDonald's clerk, cryptozoologist. Can you explain like your work in that field? Anyway, I'm saying that most monsters are like localized legends, but the vampire has truly reached a global
big.
state in terms of
They did some good marketing. Yeah, that's right.
So I can't claim to be a vampire expert either, but I have read the mandatory reading that is Count Dracula by Bram Stoker.
Of course.
Which is the origin of many of today's modern day staples in vampires. A lot of what the vampire in the story could do is what has persisted to the modern day in some sort of permutation or, you know, like not being good at night. I mean, not being good in the morning and drinking blood and having to be staked to be killed. A lot of those, although the legends and myths persist before it, has kind of come to the forefront as this defines a vampire.
Right.
And if we look now, there are so many depictions of vampires. But now that we've kind of pretty well defined it, why are they appealing? What is their appeal? Why do people like it now? Do you have any first impressions on why people like vampires as a concept?
Yeah, that's a good one, because I'm always a little bit on the fence about vampires personally. Like sometimes I think they're very cool and sometimes I think they're very like stupid. There's not really, it really depends on the story if I'm into it or not.
I need to know that second half. Like help me explain that second half.
I mean, I don't even know how to explain. Sometimes I'm just really not into it and I'm just like, I can't be immersed in this. I don't trust it. But I feel like it has to do with both the sort of, it's a very edgy thing to be a vampire, which is in general very appealing, I think, to people. It's a very fancy thing to be mysterious and brooding.
It's true.
Which is maybe not a good thing, but for vampires, that's a lot of why people find them cool, I think. Maybe it's also just a sort of predatory thing. Like, I guess it's very isolating to be a vampire, but also it's very dangerous to even talk to one because they kind of want to eat you, you know, which is maybe a problem. So maybe the tension that's kind of underneath that character development or sort of that combination of traits might be interesting. But yeah, I don't know. It's a pretty hard question to me.
Yeah. So I want to kind of start with like the foundations of why I think vampires are appealing. And I think I'm going to treat this like a science, but it really isn't. It's just kind of an opinion. First of all, vampires are one of the few monsters that look very human enough that they can disguise themselves in society, right? That's the first thing. They're like immediately relatable on a visual level. Secondly, they live for a very, very long time. Being part undead, they have long-lived lives and they can persist through the centuries, which makes them a little bit anachronistic no matter where they are, right? They can fit into any era, any story, and still be their superpowered undead night-dwelling selves and be perfectly fine. There's also that idea that was reinforced by the stories told in Count Dracula that vampires are charming. They have to get their victims somehow.
It's a charisma thing as well. Yeah.
Yeah, they're charismatic. They kind of have to lure their prey into a certain spot so they can feed on them in the secrecy and hide their identity. So there's kind of like a little bit, there's that twinge of mystery thrown in. Now with that, you're pointing at somebody who is long-lived, super strong, attacks people on a very personal level. And some people are like, wait a second. That's romantical.
It's kind of intimate in a way. Yeah.
Wait, that's kind of intimate. That's kind of weird. Which has led to the romanticization of vampires, of the attractive monster, you know? And that's led to things like Twilight, like Vampire Diaries, which surprisingly I've read a good amount of. I didn't expect to.
Love that for you.
And of course, Castlevania, which is a video game turned into a hit series.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of that one. Fun. Yeah. That was on my list.
Yeah. There's the Tuck Everlasting-esque interest in the appeal of a long-lived creature, somebody who transcends generations. You kind of have to feel for them as their lives cannot be normal. They have to deviate from the norm because one, they feed, and two, they live forever. So how do you fit yourselves into a society with those two traits? It's very difficult. You're kind of almost automatically typecast as an evil person because of the way you have to survive, you know? So you have the dichotomy of a good vampire. What does that even look like? What's the story behind that? Because if you're feeding on people, you're clearly not good. But if you're just trying to live, then that's, you know, pitiable. Right?
Yeah.
Sympathizable. And of course, there's the power fantasy of just being very strong and hunting a very dangerous, very smart, very cunning monster that appeals to like all those comic book fans. And all that
Yeah,
sort of
for
thing.
sure.
So there's a lot of angles here, right?
I think it also taps a little bit into the idea of something being larger than life, but then because it looks very human and behaves like it understands humans very well, because aside from the sort of typical superhuman, I guess, traits, they're still very much humanoid. It's not very estranging in that regard. Also, they've lived for forever, so I feel like they know a lot about cultures and how to behave normally, even if they're not.
Right.
So they blend in very well, but then also all the other stuff is very true. Like they can behave very normal, but then the larger than life quality is the fact that they maybe don't like to get into relationships very easily because the danger's there. Or they do, and then everyone ends up dead. And that's kind of interesting and mysterious, even though it's very sad.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's a very thin line there or something that works very well for a character, that the combination of traits and sort of dangers attached to it feels very specific and well combined, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's held up over the years, over the centuries.
Apparently, yeah.
And in the field of talking about vampires, and now that we've defined them and what they stand for, right? Them simply existing shapes the stories that are told, right? If you have a vampire in your story or in your world, there are irreconcilable truths that you kind of have to accept. One, there's undead people. Two, there's people who live for a very long time. And three, they're living human-shaped predators, right? They seek out the blood of people. So those three things lead themselves to a very gothic sense of story, to a little bit of mystery, a little bit of horror, have to be twisted into your story no matter where it starts from, unless you have like the friendliest vampire like the Count from Sesame Street. Those 3 points are irreconcilable.
Yeah, I feel like we shouldn't like rule those out. Those are very legitimate as well.
I love the stories that have vampires dealing with not having human blood, and they had to like come up with substitutes. They're like, oh, we've been feeding on cows for years, the blood packets from Walmart aren't doing it anymore,
I always wonder what that does to a vampire's like digestion and stuff. Like it feels as if you need specific human blood. Like, is it just a sort of, the way you described it earlier, like caviar versus, potatoes? Or is it like, I don't know, is it both nutritious, or is it like if you really don't have human blood anytime, you'll basically die or you'll lose a bunch of, I don't know.
The way I understand it, it's like white bread versus whole bread. Like human blood is truly nutritious.
Gotcha.
And other blood or other sources will just kind of do it for a little bit. Just enough to fill your stomach, but not enough to be
inspiring.
healthy.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting.
That like craving for human blood is like something that slowly drives them to some sort of madness or pushes them to action.
Also a good mechanic, by the way. When does the character stop behaving morally, and when does the, I guess, need for blood become, or human blood maybe, become so large that the sort of predator side overtakes, right? That's also an interesting duality as well. In general, there's a lot to these people, these vampires, that makes them both interesting in a sort of from a consumer perspective, like from a reader or the one watching the story, and also to write, because there's a lot to work with before you've even started your actual storyline, right? There's a lot of things you can tap into, which is very good.
You have a great amount of people who have already bought into the myth and the legend, who like see vampires on the cover and are like, I'm into this. I already get it. Just give me your story. Less explaining to do, just toss them.
And then also good to realize that there's both sides to working with a famous kind of trope like this, right? On the one side, you can basically lean on everything that came before and all the mystery that's already attached to it. And then on the other side, how do you make it original, and how do you make it your own without sort of sacrificing the mystery or the whatever it is that fascinates you about vampires, which always comes with something as famous or as large as a genre like
Come
that.
to the territory. Yeah, absolutely. And how they twist it, it's always so interesting, and sometimes a swing and a miss, like the sparkling in the sunlight.
Oh, yeah.
Swing and a miss.
That one wasn't on your list, Dante. Did you purposefully forget about it?
Oh, I mean,
yes, you did.
It's not standardized. I gotta say, it's not in the common core of vampires.
I always love when we talk about myths and random creatures like this, that it feels very much like we're trying to explain it, even though like it's made up.
Oh, there's a whole science behind it.
Yeah, this is like the nice thing of, I always have this with D&D lore as well, that they're like, so how do the planes work? And then someone really knows their shit and I never know because it's just too complicated and chaotic to me. And then I'm like, but someone also just made this up. You're talking about it like it's a Wikipedia article, but it's really just, a fan fiction article. And I love that because it sounds very real, even though we're talking about vampires. That's really nice.
Whenever we talk to our game master about the 9 hells or demons and devils, they have encyclopedic knowledge
on
something that is
they're so elaborate
truly
on it,
fictitious.
which I love.
and
I will never be
impressive.
in my life. But that's why we have them. Yeah.
Yeah. And if that's you for vampires, more power to you. If you have a favorite type of vampire or a favorite story of vampire, let me know.
Please educate us as well if you have more knowledge than us. Please tell us more about vampires.
If there's anything you'd like to correct us on, please send us an email at yourriversarewrong@gmail.com.
There you go. Amazing.
And that's pretty much all I had to say about vampires. Yeah. I could ramble on a lot about it.
This is just the tip of the iceberg, yeah. But a good one, yeah. We got to start somewhere. And I feel like we're always sort of diving in this later on somehow, or are we coming back to things or revisiting as we go?
Oh, yeah.
Very nice.
This isn't the last time you hear about it.
Oh, they'll be back.
They'll be back.
Okay.
From here, let's jump into your topic.
Yeah, I will. I'm very happy we didn't pick the same topic because I was like, this might very well be so general that it's maybe part of your topic anyway in all cases, whatever you'll pick. So it's kind of true. I don't know what intro that is, but...
I have one guess. I'm going to write it down. And if I'm right, I'll hold it up to the webcam.
I love how that's no proof whatsoever in audio format, but yes.
Yeah. You'll just have to take my word for it. All right, this is my guess.
Okay.
Fire away. And I'm not going to show you. You say it and I'll show you.
I thought it was the other way. Okay.
We got it.
Here's my topic. I want to talk to you about the Uncanny Valley and what makes things spooky.
Oh, there's no way I guessed that. Okay, cool.
Okay.
No, I guessed witches. It's fine.
What did you think?
I thought it was witches. It's
fine. Would have been amazing.
I
should have done witches because that's perfect for this. Okay. I will save this in my brain palace and revisit later.
You got it.
So why I want to talk with you about these specific things is actually because it made me think of a specific fairy tale and I looked this up because I only know the Dutch version, or the Dutch translation, I should say. But in English, it's called The Boy Who Went Forth to Learn Fear. And it's very cool. It's part of the very big Brothers Grimm collection of fairy tales. Have you heard of this or not at all?
Not a drop. Not at all.
It's very nice. And it's basically what the title says. It's about a boy that goes on adventure because he has never known fear and he feels very sad about it and he really wants to learn what fear is. And I think the Dutch translation is actually even better, which is De jongen die wilde leren griezelen, which basically means the boy who wanted to learn how to, and then this word griezelen is pretty hard to translate, but I would say it's something like shuddering of fear or like shivering from fear. That's kind of what it means.
Okay.
So he has never been able to feel fear and he really wants to learn it. So he goes on an adventure and goes to this castle and meets all kinds of scary situations and people, but it never really works for him. The end is a bit lame, where basically I think his wife shocks him with a bucket of water on top of a door or something. And he's like, oh, now I finally learned how to shudder because I'm shuddering from the water that's now in my face, which is a bit lame. But what I love about this story is that this concept of griezelen or learning to fear is very strange. Like that's never really the way to tap into fear, or that's not really how you fear in general. Like, can you even learn to be scared of something, right? What does that even mean?
Yeah.
And that kind of made me think of what that even is. Like, what makes something naturally scary and what is not scary at all or is accidentally scary? And I think then you come a little bit into the territory of the Uncanny Valley, which is a very cool, weird way of thinking about fear as well. So I'll explain that a little bit for the uninitiated. I think I learned about this in art school, actually, in the first year, where we talked about how some visuals, specifically regarding like 3D sculpting or 3D animation, for instance, can have this aspect where something is almost realistic, but not quite. It just doesn't go all the way 100% hyper-realism. And then somehow, because it's very close to something, it's very close to resembling something perfectly, but not quite, it ends up in what people call, quote unquote, the Uncanny Valley. I guess the best way to describe it is when something becomes almost human or almost very recognizable, but not quite, it suddenly turns into something very terrible and scary. I think I have this with like wax museums, for instance, or with like certain rubber masks that are very, very much look like real human faces, but then it's over your... As I'm talking about this, it already freaks me out. It's gross as fuck. I also saw this a lot in looking up things about artificial intelligence and like sort of human-like robots and stuff. So there's a lot of talk when you talk about realism or when you talk about I guess, how human something is or looks, where suddenly something can turn into something super scary. And then when it's all the way resembling, suddenly it's fine again and it looks normal and not weird to us in our eyes, I guess. Yeah, so I think that's a cool place to start. I'm wondering if you ever heard of the Uncanny Valley, maybe to start off there.
Yeah, of course. The topic of the Uncanny Valley often comes up, at least when I hear about it, in people making like androids, very human-like robots. Right. And people keep saying, oh, we're getting real close. Oh, they can talk like humans. They can start walking like humans. And whenever they show like a visual depiction of what it looks like, it's always like, ooh, they got real close.
Yeah.
I don't like that they got
it's
real
too close. Yeah.
And for some reason, when it's just a robot, it's perfectly fine, right? But when it starts treading that line a little too closely, we start being a little bit unnerved, right? And that's what I understand the Uncanny Valley to be. As someone who follows a YouTube channel called Corridor Crew or Corridor Digital, they talk a lot about VFX and like making things look realistic using CGI.
Oh, cool.
And a lot of the things that they cover, which always ends up having a commentary, are things that end up in movies that aren't quite realistic. And whenever it comes to like humans or anything like that, they're always like, the life is in the eyes. The eyes are something that is still very, very hard to replicate. Right. And when you don't get it right, it's very obvious because we have been seeing people and meeting people for all of our lives. So we have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of references subconsciously. So when we see something that's off, even though we can't quite pinpoint what is off about it, we know subconsciously that it's not quite there. And like that little pocket, right? That little pocket is where the Uncanny Valley lives and thrives.
Yep, for sure. For sure.
That's what I understand about it. Yeah.
One of the examples of the Uncanny Valley that I find very striking as an example of the subject, I guess, is how I feel about the movie Snow White, the classical one. I know this sounds weird, but I've seen this like when I was very little. So maybe like 4 or 5 or something. So it's in my brain, but not quite. And then recently, I don't know, half a year ago or something, or a year ago, I rewatched this movie. And suddenly I realized that some parts are really strange. Because this is an old movie, right? So they used other techniques than we're used to now. And it was still traditional animation. So, physical on paper animation.
Right.
And what I realized is that they made certain combinations of parts that were rotoscoped, which is basically making a video of an actual person. I think it was like a dance or a Snow White was running or something. So they asked a model to run towards the camera or something. They videotaped it and then they traced over the video frames basically to make the animation. This is a technique that's still used sometimes. But for Snow White, for certain scenes, they used it for specifically the way a dress flows around someone when you dance, But then in certain scenes, I suddenly was super kind of weirded out by it because it combined it with, for instance, the way the dwarves are animated. And the dwarves, if you remember maybe, are more, to me, almost resembled the way they animated animals, like more bouncy and more cheery and more cartoony. And then Snow White, on the other hand, was very much an actual human because they traced over the video of someone actually walking and doing stuff. And then the combination of those two, even though the dwarves are supposed to be human too, just, little, but that's about it, became very weird because suddenly you have these two techniques that are merging because they are made with the same, material or by the same hand, I guess. But then because they started on different sides of the spectrum, like one was real and then turned into animation and one was nothing and then turned into animation, they became very weird and I was super weirded out by it. And I was like, why do I hate this so much? And I realized that it was because of the combination of techniques and because animation in general is, I think, a field in which the Uncanny Valley is already pretty present, right? Like, I think we talked about this too at some point where we talked about how WALL-E was created in 3D and that as soon as... Did we talk about this? Maybe not.
I don't think we did. No.
I remember, maybe I talked about this with someone else. I'm not sure. But I remember having a conversation about how WALL-E was created and that at some point when they reflected light in the sort of glasses or eyes of WALL-E, that suddenly it made a huge difference because, as you were saying, the light is in the eyes, or the life is in the eyes, I should say. And then suddenly it becomes likable, or it becomes like you can interact with it, or it becomes like a real living something. And the same way is true for many animated things, right? When does something that is literally just drawings on paper become something that you can believe in and immerse yourself in? And on the other hand, when does something become so realistic or so close to the original that it becomes a bit weird again, because it is not a video? it's almost a video. It's very realistic, but it's not quite. And I think animation has to really be conscious about riding that line, I guess, which is a fascinating conversation to have. But I think it comes very close. Or how do you say that? Like, it's a very thin line. So as soon as you're in the uncanny valley, I guess it's hard to come out again. Yeah.
Gotta choose a side. Yeah, that thin line is something that has to be very cautiously approached. One of Disney's greatest successes is finding these animated characters and making them close enough to be empathizable, but not close enough to creep you out, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And it's just avoiding that pocket that I can't quite explain why being there is so unnerving. Is it because we're like fearful of what progress is being made, or is it just like our internal sensors realizing that there might be something wrong with them, like unhealthily so?
I feel like when something becomes too realistic, like there's a difference between consciously immersing yourself into something, such as, cartoons or Pixar movies or anything, knowing it's fake, but understanding the mechanism of immersing yourself in. When you go to the movies, you're not constantly thinking, okay, I'm going to sit in this chair with like this very large projector in front of me for 2 hours, right, and there's people around me. That's not what you think, because you forget about it because you're ready to be immersed.
Yeah. You got like a layer of suspension of disbelief walking into it.
And I think that layer of suspension of disbelief, or that understanding of how that layer works, is maybe the better wording. Mm-hmm. That understanding gets challenged in the uncanny valley because it's so close to what we know that suddenly we have to figure out if it's actually real or if it's not real. And then because it looks so close to the original but not quite, I feel a little bit threatening as well. Like the thing we don't understand but in real life is often, I guess, dangerous to us. Very often it shouldn't be, but that's kind of how the mechanism works, how I guess first impressions work as well, and something that is so close to what we know is normal, but not quite. And then also we're not sure if it even exists or not. I think that's that's pretty scary. That's pretty scary to me.
That's totally fair.
Yeah. So I think it's somewhere in that area that it becomes confusing and threatening, I guess, to us. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. There's a whole, when we've talked about this before, there's a whole series based on this concept, which is Westworld, if you've heard of it. Westworld is a setting in which technology has gotten so advanced that robots can look almost exactly like humans in terms of their looks, in terms of their mannerisms, their speech patterns, how they interact with the world. It's so entirely human that people like pay for the experience of meeting them and existing in the same world as them. But once that veil is slightly pulled, and they reveal something that isn't quite human-like, that's when the fear kicks in. It's like, oh, that was a robot the whole time. Oh,
right.
How many people around me are robots? Oh, wait, how many people have been, am I a robot? Like the layers of it.
Spiraling out of control. Yeah.
Like your reality suddenly being twisted of something not being what it was presented to be is terrifying.
For sure.
It's very unnerving. And right now we exist in the year 2022 where androids are not quite there. And they're pushing ever more into the uncanny valley in combination with like the mechanics, mobility, the AI, the ability to respond to things. Like, they're pushing that boundary. They're really getting really, really close. So when we watch something like Westworld and we see what could be the culmination of those technologies, it's a couple of the gears turning.
Yeah.
You start thinking a little bit harder about it.
And I think as a last note on this, to tie it a little bit back into your vampire topic as well, I realized that it's actually very close to the way myths of humanoid monsters work as well. I think we talked about this just now, that vampires are so subconsciously threatening when something starts off looking like, one of us, quote unquote, just another human in my class that's ominous and brooding, but still very human, just has a little bit of pale skin. But aside from that, we're good. And then turns out to be something that's completely foreign to us, which is a vampire, or at least not like us, I guess. That's a very quick switch to make, right? And suddenly that means the thing you thought you knew is completely unknown and strange, even though it's so close to what you think you know. And that's very freaky and cool because of that. So in myths, it works in a very cool way as well. Yeah, it's very double-edged.
That's kind of the cornerstone of horror movies in general, testing what do we accept as truth and testing the foundations of our reality and really pushing the limits.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It's a very cool tool and also pretty hard to figure out where you at in your creation.
Of course. Well, hopefully we have a couple more decades before we truly have to contend with not knowing what's human and not. But, you know.
I think very quickly you can go very fast. But till then, we're good.
Till then, we're good. All right. With the topics out of the way, let's jump into our prompt. I have a prompt for Merle that she has not heard before. So she is going to improvise a story or a world or a setting that ties into this one sentence prompt.
Yep.
So, sticking with the theme, I would like you to describe a setting. It could be city, town, village, country, whatever you want, where the minority is humans. That's a prompt.
Oh, I was waiting for more, but that's just it. Okay.
That's it.
So do we know what the majority is? Is it just humans versus vampires or humans versus anything?
Up to you. It could be multiple monsters. It could be one monster, as long as the minority population is humans.
Oh.
Any size setting, any monsters you like.
Okay. I feel like maybe I want to restrict myself a little bit because there's a lot of monsters out there, you know? It makes it pretty, pretty complicated.
In there.
Maybe let's start off with just human versus vampire population in this fictional setting, I guess, that we're building now.
Ooh.
I want something to be like super civilized, even though they want to drink their blood. I feel like the vampires are, what if they're just really nice? What if they're like a really nice people? But, you know, they have to kind of figure out how to live in harmony with the humans that are all around them without constantly like eating them and making the other humans sad that they ate their friend and stuff. You know, that's pretty tricky combination of things to live in one city, you know?
Yeah, I can't tell if this is like a horror style story or a slice of life.
I'm also not sure yet. We'll figure it out.
Okay.
So I feel like it's also very cool to be human because they're very much idolized now. Yeah, on the one hand, it's a delicacy, and on the other hand, they really shouldn't drink the blood of them because there's not a lot of them around. And also, it's not really nice. We're trying to live in peace here. I feel like maybe they came from an era where it was very violent and confusing, and then just everyone died all the time, including vampires in a sort of, I don't know, witch hunt kind of scenario, maybe. Vampire hunt, that's probably a thing. Now it's a thing. I made it up. It's real now.
That's something we entirely missed. Vampires can turn humans into vampires.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
An entirely different category.
True. Vampires are so complicated. Jeez. It's true. It's true.
There's so much going on.
Okay. So I feel like the more you drink the blood of humans, the less humans are around, which makes it harder.
That would make sense. Yes.
So there's got to be like a delicate balance. And I feel like at some point, one person was like, okay, stop eating each other. Stop killing each other. This is getting very complicated. This is like the mayor of this new Republic City kind of leveled up city concept that they're trying out. This is like a pilot program. I love it. Okay. So they were like, okay, maybe we need a limit on how many human one should eat per year or something. Or maybe there's like a concept that's kind of like a blood bank where it's like, okay, if you want to live in harmony, you guys, you got to figure it out. So maybe it's a voluntary thing now where humans are like, okay, they get maybe a lot of like, this is turning into a very boring prompt, civil advantages if they give blood or something. I don't know. Like maybe they can buy a better house.
Did they get?
I like a good house. You know what I mean? There's got to be a certain balance for them. Like, I would not want to live in a vampire city for the life of me. But, you know, if the people want to do it, if they're very adamant about it.
The housing is cheap. The tax breaks are fantastic. There's a lot of benefits.
Yeah, you just have to give some blood. Maybe every year you need to donate some shit. Maybe this is like one of the festivities now where the blood banquet or something is a thing. Where suddenly
the blood banquet,
the richest or the most altruistic vampires get invited to this very exclusive event. Maybe this is a monopoly where only one company or whatever, government, city, whatever, a council owns the distribution of who gets the blood that's donated at the blood bank. I don't know. That could be a thing.
Okay. Oh no, we're bringing classism into it. Okay. I'm seeing things. I
want this to work so bad. I really want them to be friends, but I feel like there's a lot of civil things that you need to think about before it's could actually happen.
Listen, how friendly can you truly be if one of your friends just wants to bite your neck?
I know. But I mean,
there's a lot of like social boundaries.
What if they're both just really nice, but they just happen to like be bored this way and now they're stuck on an island together? You know, they kind of have to make it work.
Oh, gosh.
Unless they just keep killing each other and then it becomes very, well, literally bloody very quickly.
There's so many like social constructs that are tested there. Like if you have a friend and you're human and they're a vampire and it's like, oh okay, just this once, and you just kind of like start giving them blood, and it's just like, oh, is that kind of like a weird relationship?
Codependent to something? Like, that's not
weird
healthy.
Codependency. That's the word.
Yeah, there's all kinds of complicated stuff around. So either you have to like make regulations for it that are so strict and specific that's really making your city or island or whatever very strange.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe gives very many benefits to humans because otherwise they'd never live there in the first place. Maybe this is just a small population of vampires that just got stuck on this island and they're like, we need more humans here. We need like marketing going on. Otherwise, we're going to be very dried up very quickly.
It's very tricky when there's more vampires than humans, right? That's kind of like a very strange situation. Mm-hmm. No, I'm not going to say it. Maybe I'll pass. I was going to say too many farmers, not enough cows. It's like a very tricky situation. Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's kind of what it is, though. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a little bit unnerving. And there's definitely, I could imagine this is like a satirical slice of life and like the social constructs are tested.
Kind of. Yeah. For sure.
Someone get.
It started off so optimistic, but it became very complicated very quickly. Maybe I'm not the best city planner here.
And that's the appeal. Yep. That's the appeal.
There we go.
Oh, gosh. That was fun. Okay, cool. I dig that. Sign me up for one vampire majority city in my next reading, and I really want to see how that plays out.
Do you really want to? I didn't really convince myself here, so
okay. I guess final question: would you live in this city?
No, I don't want the risk of being eaten.
Oh, but they're all so. But they're also personable and relatable, and they're super strong. And
like, you would need a very good pitch to get me living in this. Like, if I get a palace or like free food,
that's fair. Free food is guaranteed. What the heck? Of course it is.
Like, this needs to be a good deal for me to live in a city that's full of like people that want to drink my blood. I mean,
I'm gonna be honest with you. If you told people that this is a city full of people that find you desirable in one way or another, and or they're all very attractive, I feel like a lot of people would be sold on it.
I mean, maybe. I'm
not saying me, and I'm not saying you, but I feel like a lot of people would.
I think it's good for marketing. Yeah. It's a good message to superficially sell to people.
They got the best vampires in that commercial. I gotta say.
Very hot people all around.
Of course. I mean, think about it. New way of life. Free food. Palace,
nailed it. I solved society.
Yeah, anyway,
there we go.
There you go. Wonderful. And nobody will be able to see what you just did.
I made it very. I don't know how to try.
And I'm not going to explain it. And I'm not going to explain it.
Keep going.
Anyway, thanks for listening to our non-visual podcast. Almost spoiled it. Thanks for listening to our non-visual podcast. Hopefully, talking about vampires and the Uncanny Valley has encouraged you to tell stories of this type of your own.
Tell some spooky stories, everyone.
Non-spooky. Yeah. If you've got a slice of life vampire story, absolutely send it our way. And as you world build and storytell on this very fantastic holiday, there's one thing you should always remember.
What is it, Dante? Please elaborate.
Your rivers are raw.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Plain and simple. Mm-hmm. Have a good one.
See ya.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Your Rivers Are Wrong. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas for future episodes that you'd like to hear us cover, feel free to contact us at yourriversarewrong@gmail.com. Our intro and outro music is written by Maarten Schellekens. Thanks for that. And again, thank you so much for listening. We hope to see you at the next one.